before the empires fell silent, before the stars witnessed history, a child was born in the heart of the desert, not with armies, but with mercy. He walked with the poor. He wept for those he never met. And he lit the world without ever raising a sword. This is not just a story. It's a path, a light, a revolution of the soul. Before the sun rose on the sands of Arabia with its most radiant dawn, the world was sinking into a night that seemed endless. A night of ignorance, a night of cruelty, a night of silence from the heavens. Humanity, like a traveler lost in a vast and burning desert, cried out for water, not for the body, but for the soul. From the opulent palaces of Persia to the broken temples of Byzantium, from the dark forests of Europe to the scorching lands of Africa, hearts were parched. Civilizations advanced in architecture and empire, but backward in mercy and spirit. Children were buried alive. Women were traded like goods. The weak were crushed beneath the feet of tribal pride, and the names of God were drowned in idols of wood and stone. Arabia, a barren land, yet full of stories. A people known for poetry, but drunk on blood and revenge. The Arabs worshipped hundreds of idols, each tribe clinging to its own protector, its own totem. The Kaaba, once the house of Abraham, had become surrounded by 360 lifeless figures. Sacrifices flowed, but no revelation. Rituals remained, but the truth was buried deep. Yet in the scrolls of ancient scriptures, in the trembling voices of monks, rabbis, and seekers scattered across the earth, a whisper endured. The final prophet is coming. They spoke of a man who would walk between mountains and mend what had been broken. They waited for a light that would pierce the deepest darkness. They yearned for a mercy sent to all creation. In the heart of Arabia, in the sacred valley of Mecca, destiny began to gather its clouds. The stars aligned in quiet anticipation. The angels descended with hushed wings, watching, waiting. The time had come. The veil was about to lift. And in the womb of a woman named Amina, a light began to grow. In the quiet home of Amina bint Wahb, the air trembled with something unseen, yet deeply felt. She was alone, widowed before the child in her womb could even feel the touch of his father. Abdullah, her beloved husband, had passed on during a distant journey, leaving her in sorrow, but also in divine company. For within her, she carried a child unlike any other. A child who would change the course of human history, though the world did not yet know it. On a night like no other, beneath the stars that had long watched in silence, a birth took place. It was not heralded by royal trumpets, nor greeted by worldly kings, but the heavens. Oh, the heavens rejoiced. As the baby entered the world, Amina saw a light emanate from her that illuminated the castles of distant Syria. She held her child to her chest and gave him a name, Muhammad, the praised one. A name few had heard, but all would one day know. In that moment, the world shifted. The idols in the Kaaba shook. The fires of Persia, that had burned for 1,000 years, extinguished without a hand. The lake of Sawa dried. The stars seemed to shimmer with divine purpose. Yet in Mecca, the event passed quietly. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a newborn boy wrapped in simplicity, kissed by the breath of the divine. He did not inherit riches. He did not inherit palaces. He inherited a world in need of love, of justice, of truth. Amina would not live long. The boy she carried with such light and pain would soon be orphaned, but not abandoned, never abandoned, because this was not the son of Abdullah alone. This was the awaited one, the final messenger, the mercy to all worlds. He would walk among the poor. He would speak to the broken. He would rise in the night when others slept and cry not for himself, but for us. He was born a child, but he was already the lantern in a storm, and the storm was just beginning to stir. Before a child could even say the word father, his had already become a memory. And before he could fully know the warmth of his mother's embrace, she too was taken by the winds of fate. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was left an orphan, twice, fatherless in the womb, motherless at 6. Yet in this deep sorrow the seeds of divine strength were sown. He was not abandoned, no, he was carried by the hands of destiny, passed from chest to chest, from heart to heart. His grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, took him in with a love that bordered on reverence. The old chief would seat the boy beside him among the elders of Quraysh, as if the child already bore the weight of prophecy. And when Abdul Muttalib passed, the boy found a home in the arms of his uncle. Abu Talib, a man of courage, loyalty, and an unbreakable bond to his nephew. Muhammad grew up without silver spoons or silk garments. He herded sheep. He walked barefoot on the burning sands. He knew hunger. He knew fatigue. But he also knew solitude, and in it, silence. And in that silence, he listened to the world like few others could. He watched the cruelty of man and the cry of the helpless. He saw the blind loyalty to idols and the deafness to conscience. And something in his soul, even as a boy, whispered, "This is not the way." When he reached his youth, he began to travel with caravans through deserts, valleys, cities. He saw the palaces of the rich and the markets of deception. But even among merchants, he stood out. They called him Al-Amin, the trustworthy, because he did not cheat, he did not lie. He smiled, but he did not flatter. He was honest even when it cost him. This was no ordinary merchant. This was a soul being shaped by the Most High. The caravan was his classroom. The stars were his ceiling. The wind whispered lessons. And the world began to feel that something was coming. Something gentle. Something vast. Something that would make kings tremble and slaves rise. In the bustling markets of Mecca, where gold clinked and camels groaned, there was a woman who stood higher than the noise. Not in height, but in honor. Khadijah bint Khuwailid. A woman of wealth, yes, but far beyond that. She was known for her mind, her dignity, her unmatched grace. While other men chased fortune, she moved with it. While others bought loyalty, she inspired it. But even she had never met a man like Muhammad. She had hired him to lead her trade caravan, entrusting him with her goods and her name. And when her servant returned from that journey, his words burned brighter than the desert sun. "Never," he said, "have I seen a man so honest, so gentle with others, so pure in his dealings. He carries no lies, no greed, no arrogance, only light. Khadijah listened, and Khadijah felt not just admiration, something deeper. She saw in Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, what the angels had seen when they bowed to Adam. She saw a soul untouched by the corruption of his world, a man of silence and truth, of reflection and compassion. And she, a woman of nobility, sent a proposal. He accepted. It was not a marriage of convenience. It was not a trade of power. It was a union written by the pen of heaven. She gave him wealth. He gave her peace. She gave him a home. He gave her the comfort of eternity. And in the stillness of their home, a sacred space was born, a space of warmth, of devotion, of love that did not scream, but whispered with loyalty. Years passed. They had children, sons who passed in infancy, and daughters whose light would one day change nations. And every night, when the stars looked down upon Mecca, they saw a man who prayed even before prayer was ordained. A man who climbed the mountain, seeking not gold, but God. And a woman who believed in him before the world did. Khadijah would be the first to believe, the first to stand, the first to wipe his tears, and her name would never be forgotten. There are moments in history where time itself seems to pause, moments where the earth holds its breath and the stars lean closer to listen. This was such a moment. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, had taken to retreating from the noise of Mecca, from the lies, the injustice, the cries of the oppressed. He climbed alone to the heights of Mount Hira, to a small dark cave that overlooked the valley, like a silent witness. There, wrapped in solitude, he prayed, not with words passed down from others, but with the language of longing, a yearning for truth, for purpose, for the voice of the unseen. And then, on a night unlike any other, the silence broke. A presence filled the cave. A figure, neither shadow nor flame, stood before him. It was Gabriel, the archangel, mighty and radiant. And with a voice that shook the soul, he spoke, "Read." Muhammad trembled. "I cannot read," he replied. Again the command, "Read." The cave seemed to close in. His chest burned, his body trembled. And once more, the voice came, "Read in the name of your Lord who created man from a clot. Read, and your Lord is the most generous." The first verses of Revelation. The first light from a heaven that had been sealed for centuries. The first drops of rain on a world in drought. He ran down the mountain, heart pounding, breath stolen by the weight of what had just happened. He rushed to his beloved Khadijah, and there, in her arms, he uttered the trembling words, "Cover me, cover me." She held him. She believed him. She took him to Waraka ibn Nawfal, the old Christian sage, who wept when he heard the words. "This," Waraka said, "is the same angel that came to Moses. Would that I were young again. For your people, they will cast you out." Cast him out? The most trusted? The most beloved? Yes, because truth shakes the foundations of comfort, and revelation disturbs the hearts of tyrants. The cave had given birth to a prophet, But the world was not ready. Truth is not always welcomed. It does not knock gently. It crashes into the lies we've lived with. And when Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, rose with the truth, the city of Mecca, once in love with his honesty, began to turn. He began in quiet whispers. To his wife, Khadijah, who believed with no hesitation. To his cousin, Ali ibn Abi Talib, a mere boy. Yet the fire of faith lit brightly in his heart. To his freed servant, Zayd ibn Haritha, and to his loyal friend, Abu Bakr, whose belief came like a sunrise. Each of them, first followers, not just believers, but builders of a new world. But soon, the whispers grew. They reached the ears of Quraysh, and with them came fury. How could Muhammad, the orphan, the traitor, speak against the gods of their fathers? How dare he call their idols worthless, their customs broken, their power unjust? The storm began. They mocked him, called him a liar, a madman, a magician. They offered him riches, women, leadership, anything, if he would just stop. But he would not stop, because this was not ambition. This was revelation. And the Quran, oh, the Quran, it came in waves, verses that shook hearts, that shattered pride, that exposed hypocrisy, that healed wounds. And for every verse he recited, a new soul would awaken, a slave, a woman, a child, a seeker. Among them was Bilal, the Abyssinian slave, whose voice would one day call the world to prayer. They beat him with stones, lashed him under the burning sun. But all he cried was, Ahad, Ahad, one, one. The leaders of Mecca could not stop the rise. So they turned to violence, to exile, to torture. But Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, did not retreat. He walked among his people, reciting verses, his face calm, his gaze deep, his footsteps echoing the path of all the prophets before him. He did not fight with swords. He fought with truth. And truth, real truth, pierces deeper than any blade. The city that once loved him now hated him. But the heavens were opening, and the earth, though it groaned with resistance, was preparing itself for transformation. Even the strongest hearts bleed. Even the greatest of men are tested to the edge. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was no stranger to loss. But what came in the 10th year of revelation would be remembered not as a wound, but as a canyon carved into his soul. First, Khadijah, his pillar, his light, his home, returned to her Lord. The woman who believed in him when none did, who sheltered him when the world turned away, gone. Then, days later, Abu Talib, his uncle, his protector from Quraysh's cruelty. Though he never embraced the message, he never let harm touch his nephew. Now both were gone, and Mecca grew colder. With no shield left, the insults became stones, the mockery became blood. They threw waste at him. They choked him while he prayed. They spat, cursed, and laughed. Yet he endured, not with anger, but with sorrow for their ignorance. Seeking hope, he turned to Taif, a city of palm trees and poets. He walked there, miles upon miles, with a heart full of mercy. He offered them the truth, and they responded with stones. Children chased him. Men threw rocks. His feet bled. His body collapsed in a garden. And there, under a fig tree, he raised his hands, not in vengeance, but in broken humility. O Allah, I complain to you of my weakness. He did not ask for destruction. He asked for guidance, for them. And then, when the world had turned its back, the heavens opened wide. In the stillness of night, Gabriel came again, not with a verse, but with a steed. Al-Buraq, a creature of light, swift as lightning. And from the sacred masjid in Mecca, he soared, not in dream, but in reality, to Jerusalem. There he led all the prophets in prayer. Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Joseph, David, all behind him. And from there, from the blessed rock, he ascended through the 7 heavens. He met Adam. He embraced Yusuf. He wept with Yahya and Isa. He saw the lote tree of the utmost boundary, the throne, the angels in prostration, the rivers of paradise, and then the greatest honor. He came close to his Lord, closer than any being ever had, beyond time, beyond space, beyond description. And from that nearness, he returned with a gift prayer, 5 times a day. A ladder for every believer to rise, a reunion in every sujood. The earth had broken him, but the heavens lifted him, and he returned not bitter, but stronger. For the night had shown him, behind every sorrow, there is a sky full of mercy. When a land rejects the truth, Allah prepares another land to embrace it. The fires in Mecca grew fiercer. The Quraysh had reached a decision. Muhammad must die. But the plot of men is weak before the will of God. One night, as swords were drawn in silence and assassins crept toward his home, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, placed Ali in his bed, a decoy, a trust, a symbol of courage. And then, with calm steps and the name of his Lord on his lips, he walked out, unseen, untouched. The migration, the Hijrah, had begun. He joined his loyal companion Abu Bakr, and together they slipped into the wilderness. For 3 nights, they hid in a cave, Thor, while the enemy scoured the mountains. They came so close, Abu Bakr whispered, "If they just look down, they will see us." And the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, replied with words that would echo for eternity, "Do not be sad, Allah is with us." A spider spun its web. A dove laid her eggs, and the eyes of the enemy were blinded. The Prophet continued his journey across scorching plains, through thorny paths towards a city that had been waiting for him, even before they knew his name. Yathrib, a city wounded by tribal war, a city yearning for peace. They had heard of him, the Prophet foretold in scriptures, and when they saw him approach, children climbed trees, women lined the streets, and voices rose with joy. "The Prophet has come, the Prophet has come." They renamed their city Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara, the radiant city. And thus, From the ashes of rejection in Mecca rose the first Muslim society in Medina, a place of brotherhood, of justice, of light. The world would never be the same again. In Medina, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was no longer just a preacher. He became a leader, a judge, a teacher, a statesman, a general, but above all, a mercy. He built a mosque with his own hands, its walls humble, its roof of palm leaves. But in that space, hearts bowed, spirits rose, and a nation was born. He united tribes that had once bathed their swords in each other's blood. He made them brothers. He erased the lines of race and rank. He welcomed Jews, Christians, Africans, Arabs, freed slaves, all with justice. And yet, Mecca would not rest. The Quraysh could not bear his rise. They marched to Medina with weapons drawn. The Muslims, few in number, armed with faith, stood in defense. Badr, a battle where angels descended, where 300 faced nearly 1,000, where truth stood in the face of tyranny and triumphed. Then came Uhud. Victory turned to trial. Mistakes were made. 70 companions were martyred, including his beloved uncle, Hamza. The Prophet wept. He buried his uncle with trembling hands, but he did not lose hope. Then, the trench. 10,000 enemies surrounded Medina, but with Persian wisdom and prophetic vision, he ordered a massive trench to be dug around the city. The believers dug day and night. Their hands blistered, their stomachs empty, but their spirits full. When the enemy arrived, they were halted, divided, demoralized. Without a sword drawn, the Muslims had won. But even in war, the Prophet taught mercy. He forbade mutilation. He protected captives. He pardoned even those who spat on him. He was not just a general. He was a guide, and through every treaty, every defense, every hardship, he built not an empire of land, but a community of faith, a nation of hearts. He could have ruled like a king, but he chose to sleep on mats of straw. He could have ordered palaces, but he lived in clay rooms because his mission was never power. It was light. After years of exile, war, and pain, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, returned to the city that had once cast him out, not with vengeance, but with victory clothed in humility. Mecca, the city of his birth, the city that had stoned him, mocked him, hunted him, now stood trembling beneath his approach. He came not with 10, not with 20, but with 10,000 believers, marching in quiet unity. No chaos, no destruction, only purpose. As they entered Mecca, the Prophet lowered his head upon his camel, bowed in gratitude to his Lord. There was no pride in his posture, no arrogance in his eyes, only light and mercy. He went straight to the Kaaba, the sacred house of Abraham, once corrupted by idols. With his staff, he pointed to each idol, reciting, "Truth has come, and falsehood has vanished." One by one, the idols fell. The house of Allah was purified. The echo of Allahu Akbar filled the valley. He prayed, not for conquest, but for guidance. Then he gathered the people of Mecca, the same who had tortured him, killed his companions, slaughtered the innocent. They stood before him, silent, ashamed, awaiting judgment. And he said, "What do you think I will do to you?" They replied, "You are a noble brother, the son of a noble brother." And he said, "I say to you as Yusuf said to his brothers, no blame will be upon you today. You are free." He forgave them all, the tyrants, the enemies, the ones who had once sworn to kill him. He forgave because he was not sent to destroy, but to uplift, not to crush, but to illuminate. And on that day, Mecca returned to its purity, not just in stone, but in heart. The years had passed. Revelation was nearly complete. The message had spread, not just through words, but through mercy, justice, and light. And now, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, prepared for one final journey, the farewell pilgrimage. From across Arabia, believers poured in. Men, women, young, old, over 100,000 hearts, gathering around the man who had once stood alone. He rode at their head, not as a king, but as a servant. He wore 2 simple white garments. He walked barefoot on sacred ground, and when he reached the valley of Arafat, he stood upon his camel and raised his voice to all of humanity. And he spoke, not in poetry, but in truth that thundered through the soul. "O people, listen to my words, for I do not know if I shall meet you again after this year." A hush fell over the crowd. He spoke of justice, of the sacredness of life, wealth, and honor. He crushed racism beneath his words. No Arab is better than a non-Arab, and no non-Arab better than an Arab, except through piety. He honored women. He upheld the rights of all. He completed the message of every prophet before him, and then he raised his finger to the sky and declared, "O Allah, bear witness. I have conveyed the message." Tears fell, hearts trembled, and from the unseen a verse descended. "This day I have perfected for you your religion, and completed my favor upon you, and have chosen for you Islam as your way." It was the peak, the final seal. And though the people rejoiced, the prophet wept, because the journey was ending. The sun was beginning to set, not the sun in the sky, but the sun that had lit the hearts of men. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, returned to Medina after the farewell pilgrimage, his mission fulfilled, his nation standing. But his body began to weaken. One morning he awoke with a headache. A fever gripped him, and yet he led the prayer. His voice was soft, but his soul shone stronger than ever. Day by day, his strength faded, but his gentleness never left. He visited the martyrs of Uhud. He prayed for his companions. He warned against oppression, against pride, against forgetting the poor. And then he asked to be taken to the home of Aisha, his beloved wife. There he lay, his head resting on her chest, his eyes heavy with light. The companions prayed outside, tears on their faces, unable to imagine a world without him. And then, in his final moments, he raised his gaze. He looked to the sky. he whispered. With the highest companion. And just like that, the soul of the greatest man to walk this earth returned to its source. The room fell silent. Aisha froze. The earth itself seemed to stop. Then came Umar, unable to accept it. He shouted, "He is not dead. He has gone to his Lord like Musa. He will return." But Abu Bakr entered. He lifted the cloth from his friend's face. He kissed his forehead. And with tears flowing, he said, "O you who are pure in life and pure in death, how sweet is death when it is for you." He stood before the people, and with calm he said, "Whoever used to worship Muhammad, know that Muhammad is dead. But whoever worships Allah, Allah is ever living and never dies." The world had lost its guide, but not its guidance. The body was gone, but the light remained forever. He walked this earth over 14 centuries ago, yet his footsteps still echo in the call to prayer rising with the dawn, in the hand that feeds the orphan, in the tongue that speaks the truth, in the heart that bows in prayer. Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was not just a man of his time. He was a mercy for all time. He spoke to the Bedouin and the king, to the warrior and the weeper, to the child who lost her doll, and the widow who lost her world. His smile softened the hardest hearts. His words opened eyes blinded by generations of darkness. His presence transformed cities, yet he lived as a servant. No palace, no crown, just dust on his feet and light in his eyes. He was the orphan who became the hope of orphans, the shepherd who guided the nations, the unlettered one whose message broke the chains of ignorance. He gave without fear of poverty. He forgave without seeking apology. He wept for those who never met him, and he said, "Blessed are those who believe in me without having seen me." That is you. That is me. That is all of us. Still walking in the shadow of his light. He left this world, but he left behind a path to God, a path of mercy, a path of love. And on the day of judgment, when every soul will flee, he, and he alone, will say, "My ummah, my ummah, my people, my people." He will intercede. He will plead. He will not rest until the last of his followers is safe. This is Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon him. The man who changed the world with nothing but truth, and whose light will never fade.